TRW, this is Pacific Islands Campaign Series. The game in particular is Iwo Jima, obviously, Mount Suribachi, Airfield number 1, Airfield number 2, and the landing beach is there on the southeast side of the island. What I'm doing here is I will be giving not really a general overview, but I will be looking at very specific aspects of the design, and that's primarily because I need to do that for myself. When I first got this game a few years ago, I really didn't know what to make of it. Now, at that time, I was still fairly new to Hex and Counter war games. That stuff not really the case anymore. So I'm coming back to the game, but I still need to get a general picture of the design before diving in, I should say. I don't think the game is necessarily very complex. That's good for me in this case. Okay, two things to say overall, two things to say by way of introduction to the introduction, and those two things are this: I have no special connection, interest at all to the Pacific Campaign, World War II, the island campaigns. No particular interest in the Marine Corps above and beyond any other aspect of Second World War ground campaigns, or I guess in this case amphibious campaigns. Just no particular anything. That's not what's drawing me here at all. So that first of all. So I'm not coming at this, knowing the individual, tonnage of destroyers by name that took place in this campaign or anything. None of that. But the second point of the introduction to the introduction is that I think I'll have an opportunity to play this face-to-face in the near future. So as usual, I do like to take my own look in a solitaire manner before I try a game face-to-face with somebody else. Before I try the game face-to-face. So that's what I'm doing here. So with that in mind, I am definitely approaching this again, not as any, not from any particular interest in the historical setting or anything like that. I'm approaching this as a military simulation of this type of operation, World War II, especially combined arms. That's how I'm approaching this. So once again, and to make clear, don't particularly care if this winds up being a good simulation of Iwo Jima in particular, although I am very much interested in it turning out to be a believable and acceptable, at least, simulation of this type of combat, scale and scope of combat. Let's see. Okay. I do think this is an interesting point from the introduction of the rules. Fire combat does not usually destroy an enemy unit. By the way, this has ranged combat for let's see, even infantry have. Well, I know what I was going to say. There's another point to add before I start hitting a few things from the rules, from the actual game rules. Somewhere, although I can't find it right now, I'm not going to take the time to look too deeply, but recently when I was looking over this game, I saw it described as not a hybrid, but as a game design that covers the operational and tactical levels. Now, I will always think to say something about that. That is utter nonsense. This is not operational tactical as those terms are used in modern, certainly U.S. military, certainly NATO military terminology. Okay, in war gamer terms, it's operational and tactical. I got that. But I like that. I mean, I'm in that. Right now, I'm in the mental space to be open to that. Normally, of course, I like small unit tactical, but this is not small unit tactical. Obviously, as you can see from landing beaches to the northwest side of the island is a dozen hexes. So I'm not going to be determining primary direction of fire for a bunch of individual machine guns. I'm not going to be having units crouching behind rocks. So too bad, though, as much as I would like that in general. But no, right now I am mentally, in a mental space right now to be open to something higher scale and scope. So back to infantry do have ranged combat. So as a matter of fact, I'm looking at this. Let me just grab a company, not a battalion, but a company. Real quick, this is what I'm looking at over here. So the left two values on the top, 3 and 2, are combat values. The 1 and 2 on the lower left are the ranges. So it's a combat value of 3 at range 1 and a combat value of 2 at a range of 2. So I like that. So the whole idea of having this ranged combat like that, I am interested in that. That should be a draw point for me. Okay, so fire combat does not usually. So this is from the introduction to the rules. Part of the introduction to the rules. Fire combat does not usually destroy an enemy unit, but causes suppression. Suppressed units that are forced to retreat are instead destroyed. This is how most losses will be caused. An assault attacker will always take at least one loss, since this was a very hazardous operation conducted in front of well-dug-in defenders who were able to use the terrain to masterful effect. So that, I think, is fairly significant. Yeah, that just really is significant. But hey, it's the designer's approach here, and that's I take it. Okay. I do think, I guess, for my own, and again, I'm highlighting things that I think I need to bear in mind at least as I start, if not the whole exploration of the game here. But okay, the terrain. Instead of being flat and sandy or hilly and full of jungle, this island is simply volcanic ash with some small hills, ridges, and one extinct volcano. Since this island was in the inner defense area of the Japanese Empire, they built a set of fortifications that would rival any in the world. The Japanese turned this island into a fortress that would have to be taken with the blood of many Marines and Army soldiers. Thank you. I'll just interject that. In a fight that would impress upon the American people the amount of future blood and treasure that would be needed to subdue the Japanese and force their surrender. So that's the nature of the clear terrain, and something I know for me I need to bear in mind. While this is considered in game terms clear terrain, it certainly isn't necessarily flat, and it certainly isn't necessarily open terrain. Okay. So game scales 330 meters per hex, or 1/3 of a kilometer per hex, or so 3 hexes a kilometer, about 5 hexes a mile or so. Yeah. So about 5 hexes side to side of the island here, about a mile. Ground units represent platoons, companies, and battalions. Ship units represent individual ships, and air units over here represent squadrons. So, sequence of play: U.S. player turn followed by a Japanese player turn makes up a game turn. That's what it looks like each turn. Yeah, And each turn represents a quarter of a day in time. Really? I thought it was a third of a day. Each turn represents a quarter of it? Why did I think it was... Oh, I must have been thinking of another game. No, it is four turns per day. Okay. 22nd of March. Yeah, okay. I wonder what game I was thinking. I was obviously thinking of another game. Okay, so a quarter of a day. That actually... that reminds me, that time scale, that reminds me of the SSG computer games, the Battlefront series. So that's interesting. That's nice. A nice connection, though, for me. U.S. player, so we have about 7 phases. 7 phases. 1, reinforcement, replacement, reorganization. Makes sense. 2 is amphibious landing. 3 is amphibious fire and assault. So amphibious activities are broken down into 2 of the 7 phases for the turn. Then we have a movement phase, which includes defensive first fire. Then we have air-ground attack phase. Then we have combat phase, broken down into offensive fire first, then defensive fire. That's interesting. That's interesting, except that obviously the attackers would have had to have moved up, and so they should have already taken fire during the defensive first fire. But it is interesting. Combat phase, offensive fire, then defensive fire, then offensive assault. And then finally 7 U.S. units, suppression, recovery, and interdiction placement. Then we have the Japanese player game turn. For the Japanese player, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. Yeah, 4 phases. Replacement, reorganization. That's 1. 2, movement phase with U.S. defensive first fire. Then the same type of combat phase, offensive fire, offensive assault. That looks identical to the U.S. player turn. And then Japanese unit suppression, recovery. And then finally an end of turn actions portion of the game turn there. All right. So the game comes with 5 scenarios. Yeah. These are I've laid out the units here. I'm confident that I've pulled out the right units for the most part. There are actually a few that I'm not sure I understood the game information exactly correct, but I'm not gonna spend time getting to 100% confidence. I'm at 95% confidence. I'm just going with it. I am looking first at scenario number 2. It's called Raising the Flag. Now let me be clear that it is my intention that if the game design at all catches me in a significant way, I would like to try a bigger scenario. If not the whole big campaign game, but I'm keeping open the option of following this up with a much larger scenario. Okay, but this is the smallest and quickest scenario to play. It's perfect for getting a feel for how the game is played. This will be fought only down here on the Mount Suribachi part of the map. The scenario begins on February 19th. p.m. 1945 and ends on February 22nd night 1945. So roughly got 12, 13, 14 turns about. Historical setup, the 28th Marines. These are the 28th Marines here. This is 1st Battalion, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Battalion. Stacked underneath are the component companies. I guess a remark in passing, it's a positive remark for Grognard simulations. I do kind of like... So I think of Grognard simulations as having a style where... So here's the battalion, right? And here are the companies, the component companies. Well, the component companies add up to exactly the battalion marker. There's an exact equivalency here. I kind of like that. I prefer this to designers who say that they're going to, imply some type of parts are greater than the whole stuff. I would rather that the designer tell me what that greater part of the whole is with, how about a unit? But anyways, not an issue here. So I'm just gonna say this in passing. I really like that Grenier Simulations keeps it direct, and you don't have to wonder about the non-interchangeable unit values. All right, that isn't that important, but hey, I might as well point out something I do like about Grenier Simulations that I don't see in all war games that I've taken a look at so far. So the 28th Marines have the ugly task of taking Hot Rocks, Mount Suribachi, with some supporting elements from the 5th Marine Division. So like these are supporting arms from 5th Marine Division. So with these supporting elements, 28th Marines need to cut off and then reduce the fortress. The mountain is dotted with many fighting positions and bunkers, each of which is connected by numerous tunnels. In the end, not all the Japanese defenders are eliminated, but they are buried alive and sealed inside their caves. All units are placed according to the locations listed. Okay, units can be set up, broken up. This is the breaking down idea here. What I expect to do, for example, is I expect to take the larger unit, so the battalion in this case. I expect to give the battalion a zone, and then I expect to use all the breakdown units because I want to see that type of detail, and I'm not concerned about high stacks here. Okay, high counter stacks. US player has 2 replacements available. Japanese player has no replacements available for this scenario. So obviously we'll take a look at replacements. Actually, that's about it. Well, we do have American air units, and we do have American naval units. Generally, the Japanese have some anti-air units, some machine gun units, some engineers, and infantry, and some fortresses. The Marines, the US player has all Marines, and generally we're looking at some armor, actually, some artillery engineers, and infantry, and then the naval and air support.